This is a video on completing multiple choice question practice sets. If you look at every 2-week segment within our syllabus, and I'm looking at the first 2 weeks of our syllabus, if we go down to gradable items or graded assignments, you will see that in every one of these 2-week segments there's a practice set of questions that are assigned to you by category. It will tell you the number of practice questions, 50 in this case, and it'll tell you the category of questions from which these questions must come from. In this case, it's 1A, 1B, and 1C. They were assigned on May the 30th, and these multiple choice questions are due on June the 11th. Now, before we go and determine how to actually select these questions, let's go on and take a look at the grading rubric regarding these questions that is located as part of your syllabus. These multiple choice questions are located in the syllabus under MCQ, Multiple Choice Question Practice Set Rubric. Now, as I've said in the past, one of the keys to successfully preparing for the CPA exam is to practice multiple choice questions. As I had mentioned, the multiple choice questions in terms of point rating are going to make up 50% of your exam score. Now, during the course, each student will be assigned 5 practice sets. And those practice sets are going to contain a total of 820 multiple choice questions in total. These 5 questions will total 300 points towards your overall course grade. So that's 300 points out of 1,000. So that's going to represent 30% of your total course grade. Now, students are encouraged to do their best on the MCQs assigned and practice to the maximum extent possible. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you, if you have the time, to do more than the required set of practice sets. You do not necessarily get more points towards your efforts, but you will increase your chances of passing the CPA exam. Okay, now here's something that students find interesting and different. The results of the multiple choice question practice activity will be student, in effect, self-reported. In other words, you as a student are going to have to report on the results of your activity. Each student will be provided access to the multiple choice question activity form, and that form is in your classroom. And I'll show you how that works as part of this video. So access to the MCQ activity form in the classroom with which to report their work. The student is required to complete the form and submit it by the multiple choice question due date. Each multiple choice question is worth 0.37 points, up to the maximum of questions assigned in the practice set. Again, even if you're assigned 50 practice questions and you do 80 questions, you still get credit for just the 50. But again, as I said, the more that you perform, the better off you are for passing the exam. Okay, it is assumed, this is important, okay, it is assumed that each student will carefully study and select an appropriate answer for each question attempted. Each question should be read, analyzed, and answered after appropriate consideration. If the student answers the question incorrectly, it's expected the student will review and understand the correct answer, because all that information is provided as part of, if you got the question wrong, it'll tell you why you got it wrong and give you the correct reference. In other words, even if you get a question wrong, it's a opportunity to learn. When you get a question right, it helps you confirm that you know the subject matter, but if you get a question wrong, it says you need to work on that subject matter and it gives you an opportunity to learn. So every question is a learning experience. Now, it is expected that the average time to complete a multiple choice question is approximately 2 minutes per multiple choice question. If you go back to the classroom presentation that I provided, I did mention that if you take a look at the weighting of grades and the timing involved and so forth, it should take on average, in order to complete that section of the exam on multiple choice questions, the two testlets, it should take about 1.9 minutes per question. So this is approximately the 2-minute mark I'm mentioning here. Okay, now here's something that's extremely important. Under the circumstances, there may be a presumption that the student did not complete the MCQ set with the due care described in the previous paragraph. Okay, such a presumption will be automatically assumed. Okay, if the average completion time per multiple choice question is 1 minute or less, and 1 minute or less, and the trending percentage of questions answered correctly is 25% or less. So if those two conditions exist, in other words, if you're just running through the questions as quickly as you possibly can, and you're kind of guessing at the answers, which would probably mean you're going to get 25% or less, there's a standard presumption on my part that you're not taking the exam or the multiple choice questions seriously. Under such circumstances, the student's attained score, in other words, the score you would have gotten, will be reduced by 20%. And you go, well, that isn't such a big percentage to lose, but if you think about it again, in order to pass a graduate level course, you have to basically you have to get a B, which is 80% or greater. So immediately, the maximum grade you can get out of something that has been degraded by or penalized by 20% is 80%. So at that point, you're just barely passing that set. So again, I would encourage you to use due consideration on your multiple choice questions. Also, if you for some reason you do encounter this particular condition where for some reason you answered your questions in a minute or less and scored less than 25%, you need to alert me in advance and you need to give me some reasons why. Now, if you go through the multiple choice questions and you, let's say you do finish them in an average of, let's say, 1 minute per question, and you obtain trending percentages higher than 25%, I assume at that point that you are actually, even though you answered the questions quickly, you are actually giving them due consideration. So both conditions have to exist in order for me to presume that you were not taking the proper reflection on these questions. Now the question is in terms of multiple choice questions, how many questions do you have to do in a practice set? And from what categories are you going to select them? And we'll talk about what the categories are a little bit later on. But all you have to do is you go to the 2-week interval in your class outline on your syllabus, and you look down here, and this shows 50 multiple choice questions are assigned a practice set, and they're from categories, again, 1A, 1B, and 1C. Also, you will find the multiple choice question assignments in your announcement section of your classroom. And here they are right here again, the same thing from the syllabus, 50 MCQ practice sets from CATS 1A, 1B, and 1C. And you will also find this from the area of your class assignments and tasks section. Let me click on that. And here you see tasks for the weeks beginning 5/29 and 6/5. And again, under gradable assignments, you can see under item number 2, 50 multiple choice question practice set from the CATS 1A, 1B, and 1C. Now let's take a look at where we get the actual multiple choice questions from. And we do know we get them from the Surgeon CPA review. Now I can sign in independently, or I can use this link right here where it says Surgeon CPA review from my classroom. So I'm going to click on that link, and I'm going to use that link to take me to my Surgeon CPA review. Okay, now we would log on with the Surgeon CPA review. I've entered my user ID and my password, and I go ahead and log on, and you're taken to what I call landing page. Surgeon CPA review calls their dashboard. This is what it looks like. You have these 3 big white boxes here in the middle. It says your daily surge. But the most important thing you need to look for right now is the upper left-hand corner. And these are the subject matter of the that you're studying of the exam. And you have 4 different options: business environment concepts. And with this drop-down box, you also have regulation, auditing and attestation, and financial accounting reporting. It's very important that you, since we're studying MACC 530, business environment concepts, that you have the section for BEC down here as opposed to other sections. As an example, I can pick auditing and attestation from that drop-down box, and what it will give me at that point in time now is that it will give me audit and attestation type related information and questions. So you want to make sure that under MACC 530 you're always looking at business environment and concepts. Okay, now we're going to talk about what these mystery categories are. If we go down here a little bit below these 3 big old white boxes, we see the different categories. And right now, the information in here from the multiple choice question standpoint isn't very, very important, but we're going to use these for illustration purposes. There are 5 categories available in under BEC. We have Category 1, which is corporate governance. Category 2, which is economic analysis, concepts and analysis. Category 3, which is financial management. Category 4, information technology. And the last category, Category 5, operations management. So our assignment now is to select a 50 question practice set, or 50 questions for categories 1A, 1B, and 1C. The way we do that is we go down to the bottom of Category 5 here, and we see the Selective Study Session button. We click on that. And now what we're going to see are check boxes where all the categories are checked. Category 1 is checked, 2 is checked, 3 is checked, 4 is checked, and we also see Category 5 is checked. Okay, we do know that we are going to do categories 1A, B, and C. So what this says is select the categories you would like to appear in your study section. We only want anything from categories 1A, B, and C. So we know we don't want category 5, we uncheck it. Same thing for 4, same thing for 3, same thing for 2. So now we just show category 1 as being checked. So that would say all the questions have to come from category 1, but we have to make sure that we are including or excluding any subcategories as part of our assignment. So we use a drop-down box. In this case, what it shows us is that category internal control frameworks, category 1A has been checked, and that's one of our assigned categories. We also see category 1B, Enterprise Risk Management Frameworks, is also checked, and that's one of our assignments. And category 1C is also checked, which is also one of our assignments. So all three items that have been checked, 1A, 1B, and 1C, are part of our assignments. Now what the system will do is when we start asking it to generate questions for us to answer, it will only select questions from categories 1A, 1B, and 1C and ignore any questions from categories 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay, also you can see there's some additional drop-down boxes under these categories, and I'll just select under the internal control frameworks. All these boxes, sub 1A1, 1A2 are also selected, but that's okay because they are part of category 1A. The same thing under 1B, all the sub boxes under category 1B, which are 1B1, 1B2, are also selected. So in this case now, we've selected categories 1A, 1B, and 1C. So now I click Next. And with Next now, I'm taken to another screen that says choose the duration of your session and the questions or simulations you'd like to see. Let's take a look at the drop-down box on the right at first. Okay, what we want to do is we want to select from the drop-down box all. What that means is all the questions in categories 1A, 1B, and 1C are available to be basically selected for testing. When I select all, there is a possibility that I could get a question one time or two times or maybe even three times. That's okay, because if you miss a question the first time around, you should have learned something, and now you should be able to answer that question correctly and now reinforce what you've learned. On the other hand, if it's a question you've answered correctly before, what you can do is still learn something from that question by simply taking a look at all the wrong answers and understanding why those answers are not correct. So again, each of these questions, even if they're duplicates, are a learning opportunity. So in this case, again, you want to select all the questions, and those are going to come from 1A, 1B, and 1C. Now over on the left-hand side, you have to select how many questions are you going to perform in a set. Remember, you have to have a total of at least 50 questions completed under your assignment for 1A, 1B, and 1C. So what I can do is I can do 5 questions, 10 sets of 5 questions to equal 50. In other words, I do 5 at a time. Or I can do 10 questions at a time. At that point, it would be 5 sets of 10 questions. Or I can do 25 questions at a time, and it can be 2 sets of 25 questions. And keep in mind, during these sets, you can take breaks or do whatever you want to do, rest, or, break these up again into what I'd call manageable chunks. There's nothing wrong with doing, 5 sets or 10 sets of 5 questions to hit 50 over 2 weeks. That's very, very, very comfortable and very, very doable. Or you can be more aggressive. You can also do 50 questions if you so wish. And that would be one set of 50 questions to achieve the 50 questions. Now, there are some cases where you're going to probably end up doing, because the number of questions you're being asked to complete may be not in these correct multiples. All these meet or exceed in order to get full credit. Also in the drop-down box, I have items that are called simulations, 1 simulation, 3, 5, 10. Okay, you don't even have to worry about those at this point in time. Let's assume right now we're going to do 5 questions, and the questions, again, are going to be selected from all the items that we checked in the previous boxes, which are 1A, 1B, and 1C. So I'm going to begin my session, and it's going to give me the first out of 5 questions in my session. Okay, now we select Begin Session. And now we're taking to question number 1 of 5. And at this time it says, according to COSO, each of the following is an example of an appropriate ongoing monitoring activity except for. So now I have to make my selection from one of these four items. And I'm going to simply select the bottom, approval of high dollar transactions by supervisors, and do a submit. And in this case, the approval is approval, and I got that correct, approval of high dollar transactions by supervisor. And you'll notice I get the little green light right here for that is correct. And you see at the bottom here, it talks about the question it's correct and why it's correct, and then the relevant terms if you don't understand the terms, and also the references to the Surgeon Reference Manual. And in this case, you can go ahead and take a look at the reference manual by clicking on the different items, 5113.18, and you can see the reference manual about monitoring and also the other reference regarding evaluation communication deficiencies. So these items are taken right out of the Surgeon Reference Manuals. Okay, now I'm going to go on to the next question, and I'm simply going to answer it randomly. Let's take a look if I can get a correct answer with random. In this case, it was incorrect, and I have a red dot. It shows that that's incorrect, and the correct item is the green outline here. Codes of conduct must be in writing, displayed in public areas. And again, I see the answer is incorrect, and it tells me why the answer is incorrect. It talks to be about the relevant terms if I want to look those up, and it also gives me the references to the independent or the Surgeon CPA Review Reference Manual. So every time you get a question incorrect, you're told why it's correct or why it's incorrect, and the references to the correct information. And again, even if you get the answer incorrect, it's a very, very important learning experience. Now, what I'm going to do is simply look at, I'm simply going to make a couple more selections somewhat randomly, or if I know the answer right off the bat, okay, that question I answered correctly, and then what statement regarding controls of a small mid-sized company is true. Basically, let's try that. Okay, that is a correct answer also. And let's try the next one. Maybe we'll do an incorrect answer. Let's try use of passwords. Oh, got that one right too. Okay, so anyhow, now I can view the results. And I click on view the results, and I get a summary screen of my 5 questions. It took me 4 minutes and 25 seconds. I answered 80% of the questions correctly, and the average time per question is 53 seconds per question. It also gives me the questions that I answered incorrectly and the questions that I answered correctly, and it also allows me, if I want, to review any of my correct questions or review my incorrect questions. I can click on review, and again it'll tell me the incorrect question, why it's incorrect, and so forth. Now the question is, where do I get all the information I need to accumulate for my sets of questions to report back into the classroom? So what we need to do is we need to go back to the dashboard. Now, in order to see the progress that I've been making, I go to this little person that looks like they're reading a book, and I click on that, and I go to my progress report. I click on that. Okay, now I'm going to see a detailed report. There's a detailed report and a simulations report. We don't need the simulations report, just the detailed report. And we look at corporate governance and our assignments. Category 1A, Category 1B, and Category 1C. You can also see then there's information on categories 2, 3, 4, 5, but right now we only care about 1A, B, and C. At the top it gives us an overview. The total number of questions within Category 1, the total number of questions I've answered correctly, the total average trending score in Category 1, the number of questions not seen, and lastly, the total attempts. Or I'm sorry, next to last, the total attempts, and then the total time spent on the questions. Let's take a look at if we take a look at 1A, internal control frameworks. The average score we see received is 75% on the questions that we've answered. There are 47 total questions that fit under category 1A. We've answered 13 of those 47 questions correctly. We also have an average trending score of 75%. Also, the questions we haven't seen we haven't seen 30 out of those 47 questions, and we've had 20 attempts. Now, in this case, when we're talking about the number of multiple choice questions answered, what we are interested in are the total attempts. In other words, I don't care necessarily, I shouldn't say I don't care, but it's not a question whether you answered the item right or wrong to get into your trending percentage or your average percentage score correctly. What it is telling me is how many questions did you attempt. So in this case, it shows you attempted 20 questions for category 1A, 6 questions for 1B, and 4 questions for 1C. And you can also see the average score for 1A would be 75%, for 1B would be 50%, and for 1C would be 75%. Now, notice in the case of 1B, my average score overall is 50%. There's 14 questions. I answered 2 correctly, so I didn't get too many questions, but my average trending score is going down. It's down to 30%, so the most recent questions I've answered have been incorrect, but I've had 6 attempts. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information and use it to report my activity, assuming that I did complete my activity. So now let's go to our Blackboard classroom using this activity report. Now I'm back in the Blackboard classroom, and I go to under Assignments and Tasks, weeks beginning 5/29 and 6/5. I click on that link. I then go down to my multiple choice question assignment box, and I'm going to click on the assignment box. And here I'm told my due date, the total points that are possible, and what I have down here at the bottom is I have a multiple choice question activity report for categories 1A, B, and C. I click on that report. Now what I've attempted to do is this is a surgeon review report that I just showed you just a few minutes ago, and it talks about category 1. I'm going to assume we're reporting this information from category 1 onto the multiple choice question activity report you see I've reproduced here at the bottom, and that's from our class. So we're going to transfer information from the surgeon review report to the MCQ activity report. So the first thing it wants to know is for category 1A, the multiple choice questions attempted. So if I take a look at category 1A, the multiple choice questions I've attempted have been 20. So I'm going to put in the number 20 in there. The second item it says is what is my average score as a result. My average score is this column here on the left, and it says 75%. So I'm going to type in 75%. And then it asks, what is my average trending score? In this case, it's still 75%. I type that in. And then the total time, in this case for 1A, is 26 minutes and 16 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for 1B, the total questions attempted. If I take a look at 1B, I've attempted 5 questions. The average score, 80%. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using 1A1. It should be 1B. That was my mistake. I only do the upper categories. 1B. Sorry, 1B. I attempted 6 questions. My average score is 50%. My average trending score is 30%. And the time I have spent is 5 minutes and 16 seconds on category 1B in total. Then I go on to category 1C, and in this case, category 1C shows I've attempted, right here, I'll show you again, I've attempted, questions attempted, right here. For 1C, I've attempted 4 questions. My average score is 75%. My average trending score is 75%. And I've spent 3 minutes and 34 seconds. Now I add up the number of questions. In this case, it totals 30. And I don't have to add up my percentages, but what it does say is I need to now multiply my multiple choice question points by 0.37, be 30 times 0.37, and that's 11.1 points. So the total points I would have earned in this case would be 11.1 points based upon the fact I attempted 30 questions times 0.37 points. Now, something else I will mention to you is that pretty much the policy regarding multiple choice questions is spelled out on this multiple choice question activity sheet. And again, it's assumed that you're going to be carefully studying the questions, and I can pretty much eyeball to see which questions are or where I have average question times of a minute or less. Now, just for the sake of argument right now, let's assume that I look at 1B. And what it is showing is that I did 6 questions. I attempted 6 questions in 5 minutes and 16 seconds. So let's just do a very quick mathematical calculation. So 5 minutes and let's say 0.2 seconds. That's close. So I divide that by my 6 questions, and obviously that comes out less than a minute per question, about 0.85 of a question. So in theory, that does basically violate the 1 minute, or that does hit the 1 minute or less criteria. However, So therefore, there could be a presumption that the student didn't spend enough time considering the questions. However, my average trending score is 30%, which means that I am above the 25% or less threshold, which means there'd be no presumption that the student actually didn't provide due diligence to doing their questions, and there would be no penalty assessed on that type of score. So with that then, I'm going to then go ahead and save my summary of multiple choice activity for categories report to my computer, and I'm just going to pick a save as location. Okay, based upon that then, I go back to my basically my report, your categories 1A, B, C activity box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach that activity report, browse the activity report, and in this case, what I've done is I'm just going to use just any type of file right now. Just let me try from my Mac, my Cabrini box, and then my Mac program, and then I call it new Mac 530. And under Mac activity reports, I'm going to go ahead and take that activity report from my computer and place it on the web page, and then go ahead and submit the contents. After that is submitted, you'll see it's saved and so forth, but this is from, I've got this under student preview, so it won't submit the assignment. But that's how you submit the assignment. Then you can confirm the assignment is submitted, and then you can go on from there. And that's the end of this particular presentation on multiple choice questions.